I never thought a child could teach me what 100 therapy sessions couldn't. But there I was, sitting on a cold metal chair in a shelter on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, looking into the eyes of a 9-year-old girl who had nothing. And somehow, she had everything I'd been searching for my entire life. Her name was Lily. She was small for her age, with tangled brown hair and eyes that seemed too old for her face. She wore a faded pink jacket that was 2 sizes too big and sneakers with holes in the toes. But when she smiled at me that first time, something inside my chest cracked open. I didn't know it then, but that little girl was about to change everything I thought I knew about hope, strength, and what it means to keep going when life falls apart. I had come to the shelter as a volunteer. To be honest, I was there because I was running away from my own problems. My marriage had ended 6 months earlier. My children barely called anymore. I'd lost my job after 20 years with the same company. And every morning when I woke up in my empty house, I felt like I was drowning in silence. I thought maybe helping others would make me feel better about myself. I thought maybe seeing people who had it worse than me would give me some perspective. I was so wrong about everything. The day I met Lily, I had been volunteering at the shelter for 3 weeks. I served meals, sorted donations, and tried to smile at people even though I felt hollow inside. Most days I went through the motions without really seeing anyone. But that Tuesday was different. That Tuesday, Lily walked up to me while I was wiping down tables in the dining area, and she asked me a question that would haunt me in the most beautiful way possible. She asked me, "Do you believe tomorrow will be better than today?" I stopped wiping. I looked down at her, and I realized I didn't have an answer. My throat went tight. My hands froze on the table. How do you tell a homeless child that you've given up on tomorrow? How do you admit to someone who has every reason to be hopeless that you, with all your advantages, have stopped believing? I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Lily just stood there, waiting patiently, holding that worn, stuffed rabbit with one missing ear. Her eyes weren't judging me, they were genuinely curious, like she really wanted to know what I thought, like my answer mattered to her. I don't know, I finally whispered. It was the most honest thing I'd said in months. Let me back up a little bit. Let me tell you how I got to that shelter in the first place and why a simple question from a homeless child would shake me to my core. Because to understand what Lily gave me, you need to understand what I'd lost. My name is Sarah. I'm 53 years old, though some days I feel like I'm 100. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and I married my high school sweetheart when I was 22. His name was David. We had 2 children, Michael and Emma, and for a long time, life felt like it was going exactly the way it was supposed to go. We had a nice house in the suburbs. David worked as an accountant. I worked as an administrative assistant at a local insurance company. We went to church on Sundays. We had barbecues in the summer. We were normal. We were safe, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. But somewhere along the way, normal became suffocating. David and I stopped talking about anything real. We became roommates who shared bills and occasionally ate dinner at the same table. Our children grew up and moved away. Michael went to college in another state and stayed there. Emma got married and settled 3 hours away. They had their own lives, their own problems, their own families starting. And I understood that. I really did. But it didn't stop the loneliness from creeping in like fog through cracks in a window. Every phone call that didn't come, every holiday spent with just the 2 of us, pretending we had something to say to each other. Every morning I'd wake up and wonder, is this all there is? Then came the layoffs. The insurance company, where I'd worked for 2 decades, decided to downsize. They called it restructuring. They said it wasn't personal, but when you're 52 years old and suddenly unemployed, it feels very personal. I tried to find another job. I sent out resumes, I went to interviews, but every time I could see it in their eyes. They wanted someone younger, someone with more current skills, someone who didn't represent 2 decades of loyalty that apparently didn't mean anything anymore. David and I fought more after that. Not screaming matches, we were too tired for that, just cold, quiet arguments about money and what went wrong, and whose fault it was that we felt so stuck. The silences between us grew longer. The space in our bed felt wider. We were two strangers who happened to live in the same house. One night, he told me he wasn't happy. He said he hadn't been happy in years. He said he wanted a divorce. And the worst part was, I wasn't even surprised. I wasn't even angry. I was just numb, like someone had finally said out loud what we'd both been thinking for years. The divorce was quick and clean. We split everything down the middle. I got the house, but couldn't afford to keep it, so I sold it and moved into a small apartment across town. David moved in with a woman he'd been seeing from his office. I found out later they'd been together for over a year. A year! While I was sitting at home wondering why we felt so distant, he was already building a new life without me. Emma was disappointed in both of us. I could hear it in her voice when we talked. Michael barely responded to my messages about it. And suddenly, I was alone in a way I'd never been alone before. Not just physically alone, soul-deep alone, like I'd been erased from the story of my own life. That's when the depression really hit. I'd wake up and not know why I should get out of bed. I'd go days without speaking to another person. I'd sit in my apartment and watch television shows I didn't care about, just to hear voices. The silence was so loud it made my ears ring. I tried therapy. I really did. I saw a counselor named Dr. Matthews, who had kind eyes and asked me how I was feeling and gave me exercises to practice gratitude. But sitting in her office, talking about my feelings, paying money I didn't have to tell a stranger about my emptiness, it all felt so pointless. It felt like painting over rust. It looked better on the surface, but the decay was still there underneath. One Sunday, I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the wall, when I saw a flyer that had been slipped under my door. It was from a local church advertising volunteer opportunities at a homeless shelter downtown. There was a picture of people serving food and smiling. And I thought, why not? Maybe if I helped people who were really struggling, I'd stop feeling sorry for myself. Maybe if I saw people who had lost everything, I'd appreciate what I still had. It seemed logical. It seemed like something Dr. Matthews would approve of. It seemed like the kind of thing a good person would do. And I desperately wanted to feel like a good person again. I wanted to feel like I mattered, like my existence made a difference to someone, anyone. So the following Monday, I showed up at Hope House Shelter. It was a large brick building that used to be a school. Inside, it smelled like industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetables. There were rows of cots in one room, a dining area with long tables, and a small kitchen where volunteers prepared meals. The director, a woman named Carol with gray hair and a firm handshake, gave me a quick orientation. She showed me where everything was kept. She explained the schedule. She told me the most important rule was to treat everyone with dignity and respect. I nodded and agreed, though I wasn't sure I had any dignity left to give anyone, including myself. The first 2 weeks were hard, not because the work was difficult, but because I felt like a fraud. I was serving meals to people who were genuinely struggling, and all I could think about was my own problems. I'd hand someone a plate of food and wonder if they could see how broken I was. I'd smile and say, "Here you go," and inside I'd be screaming that I was just as lost as they were, just in a different way. I had a roof over my head and food in my fridge, but I felt homeless in my own life. I felt like I was living in a shelter for people who had given up on themselves. And maybe that's exactly what I was doing. Maybe I'd come to this place not to help others, but to hide from the wreckage of my own existence. And then I met Lily, and everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon. The lunch rush had ended, and I was cleaning tables in the dining area. Most of the guests had gone back to their cots or outside for a cigarette. The room was quiet, except for the sound of my rags squeaking against the plastic tabletops. I was lost in my thoughts, going through the motions, when I heard a small voice behind me. "Excuse me." I turned around and saw her for the first time. Lily. She was standing a few feet away, holding a worn stuffed rabbit with one ear missing. She was so small, so fragile looking. Her clothes were dirty and her hair needed brushing, but her eyes were bright and curious. She looked at me like she was studying me, trying to figure something out. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, forcing a smile. "Do you believe tomorrow will be better than today?" The question stopped me cold. I opened my mouth to give her an automatic, encouraging answer, something about how tomorrow is always a new day, something hopeful and generic and meaningless. But the words wouldn't come because I realized I didn't believe that. I hadn't believed that in a long time. I don't know," I said, honestly. She tilted her head, considering my answer. "My mom says we have to believe it, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." "Your mom sounds very wise," I said softly, my voice catching. "She's sleeping right now. She works at night cleaning offices. She gets really tired." Lily hugged her stuffed rabbit closer. "Do you work here?" "I volunteer here. I help serve food and clean up." "Why?" Another simple question that felt impossible to answer. Why was I there? To feel better about myself? To distract myself from my own emptiness? To pretend I was doing something meaningful? I didn't know how to explain any of that to a child. "Because I wanted to help people," I said, though it sounded hollow even to me. Lily nodded slowly, like she was considering this. Then she said, "Can I help you clean the tables?" I blinked, surprised. "You want to help me?" "Yeah, I'm good at cleaning. My mom taught me." Something about the earnestness in her voice made my throat tight. Here was a child who had every reason to be angry at the world, offering to help a stranger clean tables. I felt tears prick at my eyes, and I had to look away for a moment to compose myself. I nodded and handed her a clean rag. Together, we wiped down the remaining tables in silence. She was thorough and careful, making sure to get the corners and edges. Her little hands worked methodically, purposefully. When we finished, she looked up at me with a proud smile that lit up her entire face. "We make a good team," she said. "We do," I agreed, and for the first time in months, my smile felt real. It reached all the way to my heart. It warmed something inside me that I'd thought had frozen solid. Over the next few weeks, Lily became a regular part of my volunteer shifts. She'd find me when I arrived and ask if she could help with whatever I was doing. We'd sort donations together, fold blankets, organize the supply closet. She talked while we worked, her voice filling the quiet spaces in a way that felt comfortable, natural. She told me about her favorite subject in school, which was reading. Her eyes would light up when she talked about books. She told me about a book she'd checked out from the library, about a girl who found a magic garden. She told me about her best friend at school, a boy named Marcus who shared his lunch with her sometimes. Her voice got soft and grateful when she mentioned that, like it was the kindest thing anyone had ever done. She also told me about her life, piece by piece, in a way that broke my heart. Her father had left when she was 4. She didn't remember much about him, just that one day he was there and the next day he wasn't. Her mother worked 3 jobs to try to keep them in their apartment, but it wasn't enough. They'd been evicted 6 months ago. Now they stayed at Hope House during the week and sometimes slept in their car on weekends when the shelter was full. Lily said it matter-of-factly, like she was describing the weather. No self-pity, no anger, just the facts. Like this was simply the hand she'd been dealt, and complaining about it wouldn't change anything. "Don't you get scared?" I asked her once, my voice barely above a whisper. She shrugged. "Sometimes, but my mom says being scared is okay. It means you care about what happens next. People who don't care about anything aren't scared of anything. I thought about that for a long time. Was that what had happened to me? Had I stopped being scared because I'd stopped caring? Had I become so numb that nothing could touch me anymore? The more I got to know Lily, the more I started to notice things about her that amazed me. She never complained, not once. If the food at dinner was bland or cold, she'd eat it without a word. If another child took a toy she was playing with, she'd just find something else to do. When her mother had to work late and couldn't tuck her in, Lily would tuck herself in and whisper goodnight to her stuffed rabbit. She had developed a resilience that I, with all my advantages and privileges, had never managed to build. And it wasn't just resilience, it was something deeper. It was hope, real, genuine hope. Not the naive kind that ignores reality, but the kind that looks reality straight in the eye and chooses to believe anyway. I saw it in the way she talked about the future. She'd tell me about how when she grew up, she wanted to be a teacher. She wanted to help kids learn to read, especially kids who found it hard. She wanted to have a house with a yard where she could plant flowers. She wanted to have a dog named Buddy. She talked about these things with absolute certainty, as if they were already real, just waiting for her to arrive. One day, I asked her how she could be so sure things would work out, how she could have such faith when everything in her life seemed so uncertain. "I'm not sure," she said simply, "but if I stop believing, then what's the point?" I didn't have an answer for that either, but her words stayed with me. They echoed in my mind when I went home to my empty apartment. They whispered to me when I lay awake at night staring at the ceiling. If I stop believing, then what's the point? What was the point of anything if we gave up on tomorrow? As the weeks passed, something strange started happening. I started looking forward to my volunteer shifts, not just because I was helping others, but because I wanted to see Lily. I wanted to hear what she'd learned in school that day. I wanted to see her smile when she successfully organized a donation box. I wanted to be near her light, because my own had gone out so long ago I'd forgotten what it felt like. But I also started noticing my own behavior through her eyes, and I didn't like what I saw. The contrast between us was stark, and it made me uncomfortable in a way that forced me to really look at myself for the first time in months. One afternoon, Lily and I were folding towels in the supply closet when another volunteer, an older man named Frank, asked me how I was doing. It was just small talk, just polite conversation, but I launched into a long complaint about my landlord raising my rent and my daughter not calling me back and how my car was making a weird noise I couldn't afford to fix. I went on, feeling justified in my misery, letting it all pour out like I'd been waiting for someone to ask, until I noticed Lily had stopped folding towels. She was just standing there, looking at me with those old eyes that had seen too much for a 9-year-old, eyes that were somehow both sad and understanding at the same time. "What's wrong?" I asked, embarrassed that I'd been complaining in front of her. "Nothing," she said quietly. Then she paused, like she was deciding whether to say what she was really thinking. "It's just, you have a car and a phone and a daughter who could call you back even if she doesn't right now." The shame hit me like a wave. It crashed over me so hard I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. Here I was, complaining to a child who slept on a cot in a shelter, who owned 3 outfits total, whose mother worked herself to exhaustion just to keep them fed, and I was upset about my rent going up $50. $50, the amount I used to spend on a single dinner out without thinking twice. "You're right," I said, my voice cracking. Tears burned behind my eyes. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't complain so much." "It's okay to be sad about hard things," Lily said, and the gentleness in her voice nearly undid me. "My mom says everyone's hard things are real to them, but she also says we get to choose what we think about most, the hard things or the good things. and whichever one we choose gets bigger. I stared at this 9-year-old girl and wondered how she'd become wiser than me. How had I lived 53 years and never learned what this child somehow already knew? That pain is relative, yes, but so is gratitude. That we all have hard things, but we all have good things. And which one grows depends entirely on which one we water with our attention. That conversation haunted me. It followed me home that night and sat with me in the silence of my apartment. I looked around at what I had: a roof, heat, food, safety. Things Lily didn't have. Things her mother worked 3 jobs trying to secure. And I'd been treating all of it like it was worthless because it wasn't the life I'd planned. I started paying more attention after that, not just to Lily, but to all the people at the shelter, to their stories, to their struggles, to the small ways they found joy in the midst of hardship. A man who'd lost his job but was grateful for the hot meal. A woman who'd escaped an abusive relationship and was building a new life one day at a time. A young couple who'd fallen on hard times but held hands when they thought no one was watching. They were all choosing to keep going. They were all choosing to believe in tomorrow, even when today was hard, especially when today was hard. And here I was, with so much more than most of them, and I'd given up. I'd stopped believing. I'd stopped hoping. I'd stopped trying. Lily had held up a mirror, and I didn't like what I saw reflected back. But maybe that was exactly what I needed. Maybe that's why I'd really come to Hope House, not to help others, not to feel better about myself, but to be shown by someone who had every reason to give up what it looks like to choose hope anyway. The turning point came on a cold evening in November. I'll never forget that night. The air had that biting quality that makes you pull your coat tighter, and the sky was heavy with clouds that promised snow. I arrived for my shift and immediately sensed something was wrong. The atmosphere and the shelter felt heavy, charged with worry. Carol, the director, was in her office with the door closed, talking to someone on the phone in hushed, urgent tones. Several of the regular guests were gathered in small groups, whispering. Their faces were drawn with concern, and I couldn't find Lily anywhere. My heart started pounding. Something was wrong. Something had happened. I could feel it in the air, thick and suffocating. I asked one of the other volunteers, a young woman named Jessica, if she'd seen Lily. Jessica's face fell, and I knew before she even spoke that it was bad news. "You haven't heard?" she said, her voice low. "Heard what?" My hands were shaking. "Lily's mom had an accident. She fell at one of her cleaning jobs last night. Broke her leg pretty badly. She's at the hospital now, and Lily is with her." My stomach dropped. The room seemed to tilt. "Is she okay? Is Lily okay?" "Physically, she's fine, Sarah. But this is bad." Jessica glanced around, then lowered her voice even more. "Lily's mom is going to be out of work for weeks, maybe months. She doesn't have insurance. She doesn't have savings. And without her income, they're going to lose their spot here too. There's a waiting list of families, and the policy is if you can't pay the minimal weekly fee, you have to give up your bed." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. The air left my lungs. They're going to kick out a woman with a broken leg and her 9-year-old daughter? "It's not like that," Jessica said, quickly, defensively. "Carol hates it, but the shelter runs on such tight margins. If they make an exception for one family, they'd have to make it for everyone, and the whole system falls apart. She's trying to find them another placement, but everything is full right now. It's November. The weather's turning cold. Every shelter in the city is over capacity." I spent the rest of my shift in a daze. I couldn't focus on anything. My hands moved through the motions, serving food, cleaning tables, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. All I could think about was Lily and her mother. Where would they go? What would they do? How was Lily handling all of this? That little girl who'd asked me if I believed tomorrow would be better than today. What was she believing now? Would she sleep in the car with her mother, who couldn't even move without pain? Would she be cold? Would she be scared? Would she lose that light in her eyes, that unshakable hope that had become my anchor without me even realizing it? I went home that night and couldn't sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence of my apartment. The same silence that used to feel oppressive now felt like a luxury. I had a bed, I had heat, I had walls that kept out the cold, and Lily and her mother might be sleeping in a car. I kept thinking about Lily's question, "Do you believe tomorrow will be better than today?" And I realized that for months, I'd been living like the answer was no. I'd been so consumed with my own losses, my own disappointments, my own loneliness, that I'd stopped believing in tomorrow entirely. I was just enduring, just surviving, just waiting for something to change without doing anything to change it. But Lily didn't have that luxury. Lily couldn't afford to stop believing. She had to wake up every day in uncertainty and choose hope anyway. She had to watch her mother work herself sick and still dream about having a dog named Buddy someday. She had to sleep on a cot in a shelter and still help clean tables with a smile on her face. She had to live with nothing and still believe in everything. And what was I doing? I had an apartment, I had enough money to get by, I had a car and a phone and a daughter who could call me back. I had time and health and freedom, and I was wasting all of it feeling sorry for myself. That night, lying in my bed, something shifted inside me. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic change. It was quiet, like a door opening in a dark room letting in just a sliver of light. But it was enough to see by. It was enough to show me a path forward that I hadn't seen before. What if tomorrow could be better than today? What if I could be the reason why? The next morning, I called Carol at the shelter. My hands were shaking as I dialed. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. But for the first time in months, it wasn't from anxiety or fear. It was from something that felt almost like excitement, like purpose. "I want to help Lily and her mother," I said as soon as she answered. "Sarah, that's very kind, but I don't know what— I have a spare bedroom. It's small, but it's clean. They could stay with me, just until Lily's mom recovers and gets back on her feet. I don't want any money. I just want to help." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear Carol breathing, could almost hear her thinking, "Are you sure? This is not a small commitment. It could be months." "I'm sure," I said. And I was. For the first time in a very long time, I was absolutely sure about something. Carol helped me navigate the process. There were background checks and interviews and paperwork, mountains of paperwork, forms to fill out, questions to answer, references to provide. But I didn't mind. Every form I filled out felt like a step towards something meaningful. Every question I answered felt like I was building something real. Lily's mom, whose name was Maria, was hesitant at first. Carol arranged for me to meet her at the hospital. She was in a bed, her leg in a cast, her face drawn with pain and worry. Lily sat beside her, holding her mother's hand, her stuffed rabbit clutched in her other arm. When I walked in, Lily's face lit up. "Sarah!" She jumped up and hugged me, and I felt my eyes fill with tears. But Maria looked wary, suspicious even, and I understood. She didn't know me. I was a stranger offering something that seemed too good to be true, and in her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. "I don't want charity," she said, her voice firm, despite the pain I could see in her eyes. "I don't want to be a burden." "You wouldn't be," I said, sitting down in the chair beside her bed. "Maria, I need to be honest with you. I'm not offering this because I'm some kind of saint. I'm offering it because your daughter has been teaching me things I desperately needed to learn, and because I have a spare room that's been empty for too long. Let me do this. Please, let me help." "But why?" Maria asked, tears sliding down her cheeks.
Why would you do this for people you barely know?
I looked at Lily, who was watching me with those old, knowing eyes. Because someone once told me that we get to choose what we think about most, the hard things or the good things, and whichever one we choose gets bigger. I've been choosing the hard things for too long. I want to choose something good. I want to choose hope. And you and Lily, you've shown me what that looks like. Carol stepped in then, gentle but firm. Maria, sometimes accepting help is the bravest thing you can do. And sometimes letting someone help you is actually a gift you give them. This woman needs you as much as you need her right now. Don't rob her of the chance to do something meaningful. Maria looked at her daughter. Lily nodded, her eyes pleading. Finally, Maria took a shaky breath and nodded too. 2 weeks later, Maria and Lily moved into my spare bedroom. Maria was on crutches and in obvious pain, though she tried to hide it. She moved slowly, carefully, wincing with every step. Lily carried their few belongings in 2 garbage bags and looked around my small apartment like it was a palace, like she couldn't quite believe this was real. When she saw the bedroom they'd be staying in, with its actual bed and clean sheets and a window that looked out over the parking lot, her eyes filled with tears. She ran her hand over the comforter, then looked up at me. "This is for us?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "This is for you," I said, and I had to turn away because I was crying too. That first night, I made spaghetti for dinner. It wasn't fancy, but I'd set the table with actual plates and glasses, and I'd even put out a small vase with flowers from the grocery store. I wanted them to feel welcome. I wanted them to feel like this was home, at least for now. We sat together, the 3 of us, and ate. Maria was quiet, still processing everything, still adjusting to having to accept help. Her pride was wounded, I could tell, but she was also exhausted, and sometimes exhaustion makes space for grace. But Lily talked enough for all of us. She told her mom about the book she was reading, about what she'd learned in school, about how nice the bed felt. Her voice was animated, excited, hopeful, and watching her, I felt something unfurl in my chest, something that had been tightly closed for so long I'd forgotten it was there. After dinner, Lily helped me clean up while Maria rested on the couch. As we washed dishes together, Lily looked up at me with those bright, searching eyes. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. It was the same question her mother had asked, the question everyone would probably ask. It was a fair question, an important question. I thought about how to answer it honestly. "Because you taught me something," I said finally, handing her a plate to dry. "You taught me that hope isn't something you have when life is easy. Hope is something you choose when life is hard, and I'd forgotten how to choose it. You reminded me." Lily smiled, that beautiful, bright smile that seemed to light up the entire room. She went back to drying dishes, humming softly to herself. And in that moment, standing in my tiny kitchen with a 9-year-old homeless girl, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt needed. I felt purposeful. I felt alive. I felt like maybe, just maybe, tomorrow really could be better than today. The months that followed weren't easy, but they were good. Real good. The kind of good that comes from struggle and growth and learning to see beyond yourself. The kind of good that leaves marks on your heart. The good kind of marks. The kind that remind you what it means to be human. Maria's recovery was slow and painful. She went to physical therapy twice a week, and I drove her there. We'd sit in the waiting room together, and she'd tell me stories about her life, about growing up in Mexico and coming to America with dreams of a better life, about Lily's father and how his leaving had nearly destroyed her, but that Lily had given her a reason to keep fighting. She struggled with not being able to work, with feeling dependent, with worrying about money constantly. Some nights I'd hear her crying in her room, trying to muffle the sound so Lily wouldn't hear. My heart would break for her. this proud woman who'd worked 3 jobs to keep her daughter safe, now forced to accept help from a stranger. But she was also strong and determined. She filled out job applications from my couch. She made phone calls to every contact she had. She researched programs and resources. And slowly, slowly, she started to heal. Not just her leg, but something deeper, something that had been broken long before the fall. Lily adjusted to having a stable place to sleep in a way that made my heart ache. The first few weeks, she'd wake up in the middle of the night and come to my room, just to make sure we were still there, that this wasn't a dream. I'd walk her back to her bed and sit with her until she fell asleep again, stroking her hair and humming soft songs my mother used to sing to me. Eventually, she stopped waking up. She started sleeping through the night, deeply and peacefully like children should. And every morning when I'd see her at the breakfast table, rested and smiling, I'd feel grateful. Grateful that I could give her this small thing, this normal thing, this safe thing. Having them there changed me in ways I couldn't have predicted. My apartment, which had felt so empty and hollow, suddenly felt full. There were voices in the morning. There were sounds of cooking and laughter and normal life happening. The silence I'd been drowning in was replaced with the beautiful chaos of family. Maria and I would talk while Lily did her homework at the kitchen table. We'd share stories about our lives, our mistakes, our hopes. She told me things she'd never told anyone else, and I did the same. There was something about the circumstance that made vulnerability easier. We were both at rock bottom in different ways, and there was a strange comfort in that. I told her about my divorce, my loneliness, my feeling of being useless and forgotten, and she listened without judgment, just nodding and understanding in a way that Dr. Matthews, with all her training and techniques, never quite had. "You're not useless," Maria said to me one night after Lily had gone to bed. We were sitting in the living room drinking tea. "You gave us hope when we had nowhere else to turn. You gave my daughter a safe place to sleep. That's everything. Don't you understand? That's everything." But the truth was, they'd given me more. They'd given me purpose. They'd given me a reason to get up in the morning. They'd saved me just as much as I saved them, maybe more. Lily continued to amaze me every single day. She helped around the apartment without being asked. She did her homework diligently at the kitchen table. She made friends with a neighbor girl named Sophie, and they'd play in the courtyard. She brought home perfect scores on her spelling tests and drawings she'd made in art class that I hung on my refrigerator like proud grandparents do. She was thriving, not in spite of her circumstances, but perhaps because she'd learned so young that happiness isn't about what you have, it's about what you choose to see. And watching her thrive gave me permission to do the same. One Saturday morning, about 3 months after they'd moved in, I woke up to the sound of giggling in the kitchen. I came out to find Lily and Maria making pancakes together. Maria was still on crutches, but getting around much better. Lily was carefully pouring batter onto the griddle, her tongue sticking out in concentration. When they saw me, they both grinned. "We're making breakfast," Lily announced proudly, "to say thank you." "I don't have to thank you," I said, though my throat was tight with emotion. I was in my pajamas, my hair a mess, tears threatening to spill over, and I'd never felt more blessed in my entire life. "We want to," Maria said softly. "You've given us more than a place to stay, Sarah. You've given us hope. You've given us family."
That word hit me hard. Family. I'd had a family once, or at least I thought I did, but it had fallen apart because we'd stopped really seeing each other. We'd stopped being present. We'd stopped choosing each other every day. But here, in this small apartment with a woman and her daughter who weren't related to me by blood, I'd found something that felt more like family than anything I'd had in years. We ate pancakes together that morning, the 3 of us, and talked about silly things and important things and everything in between. And I realized that this was what I'd been missing. Not a perfect life, not a life without problems, just a life with connection, with purpose, with people to care about and people who cared about me. In April, Maria got a job. It was a good job, with benefits and regular hours, working as an office manager for a small construction company. Her boss was understanding about her needing to continue physical therapy. The pay was decent. When she got the offer, she came home and told us, and all three of us cried. We stood in the kitchen, holding each other, crying tears of joy and relief and gratitude. "We can start looking for our own place," Maria said that evening, though I could hear the conflict in her voice. She wanted independence, but she'd also grown to love our little routine. We all had. "You don't have to rush," I said quickly, maybe too quickly. "Stay as long as you need, or want." But we both knew they needed to move on, not because anyone wanted them to leave, but because Maria needed to stand on her own feet again. She needed to prove to herself that she could do it, and I understood that. I respected that. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is letting them go, even when you want them to stay. They moved out in June into a small two-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes away. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Maria had saved enough for the deposit and first month's rent. She'd bought some furniture from a thrift store and accepted some hand-me-downs from the shelter. On moving day, I helped them pack their things, and we all pretended we weren't about to cry. Lily hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You'll still come visit, right?" she asked, her eyes worried, searching my face for reassurance. "Every week," I promised, "and you can come visit me too, anytime you want, day or night. You'll always have a key." "Do you believe tomorrow will be better than today?" she asked me, echoing the question she'd asked that first day we met, the question that had changed everything. This time, I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said, smiling through my tears. "I do." And I meant it. With every fiber of my being, I meant it. That was 2 years ago. Lily is 11 now, almost 12. She's grown taller and her hair is longer, and she's lost some of her baby face, but her eyes are still bright and curious and full of hope. That hasn't changed. I don't think it ever will. Maria's doing well. She got a promotion at work. She and Lily live in a nicer apartment now, a two-bedroom in a better neighborhood. Lily has her own room with posters on the walls and books on a shelf. They even got a dog last year, a scruffy little terrier mix from the shelter. Lily named him Buddy, just like she always said she would. I see them every week, sometimes more. We have dinner together, we watch movies, we celebrate birthdays and holidays. They've become my family in a way that feels more real than the family I was born into. Don't get me wrong, I've reconnected with my children too. Emma and I talk regularly now, and Michael visited last Christmas with his girlfriend, but it's different. With Maria and Lily, I'm not carrying the weight of past mistakes and old resentments. We're building something new, something chosen. I still volunteer at Hope House Shelter every week, but I'm different now when I'm there. I'm not running away from my own problems anymore. I'm there because I genuinely want to help, because I've learned that helping others and helping yourself aren't separate things. They're the same thing. When you give someone else hope, you give yourself hope too. I've learned so much from Lily. That 9-year-old homeless child taught me things that years of therapy and self-help books never could. She taught me that hope isn't about pretending everything is fine. It's about believing that everything can get better, especially when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. She taught me that gratitude isn't about ignoring your problems. It's about choosing to see what you have instead of only seeing what you've lost. She taught me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about showing up. It's about choosing each other. It's about loving people not because you have to, but because you want to. Most importantly, she taught me that it's never too late to start again. I was 52 years old, divorced, unemployed, depressed, and alone. I thought my life was over. I thought the best parts were behind me, but I was wrong. The best parts were just beginning. They just didn't look like anything I'd expected. Last week, Lily brought home a school project. They'd been asked to write about someone they inspired. She wrote about me, about how I'd given her and her mother a home when they needed one, about how I'd shown her that kindness still exists in the world, about how I'd taught her that it's never too late to help someone. When I read it,
I cried. Because she had it backwards. She was the one who'd inspired me. She was the one who'd shown me that kindness and hope and resilience were still possible. She was the one who taught me that it's never too late to start over, that it's never too late to believe in tomorrow. I told her this, and she just smiled that bright smile of hers and said, "Maybe we taught each other." And you know what? She's right. That's how the best relationships work. You don't just give or just receive. You do both. You learn from each other. You grow together. You become better versions of yourselves because you've chosen to see each other, really see each other, and love each other anyway. So if you're listening to this and you're in a dark place right now, if you feel alone or forgotten or like your life doesn't matter anymore, if you lost your job or your marriage or your sense of purpose, if you wake up every day wondering why you should bother, I want you to know something. I've been there. I've felt all of that. And I want you to know that it can get better. Not easily, not quickly, but it can. Sometimes the answer isn't in therapy or medication or big dramatic changes. Sometimes the answer is in the small choice you make to show up for someone else, to volunteer, to help, to give what little you have left to someone who has even less. Because in doing that, you remember that you still have something to give. You still matter. You still have value. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you'll meet a 9-year-old girl in a homeless shelter who will ask you if you believe tomorrow will be better than today. And in trying to answer her question, you'll find your own answer. You'll find your own hope. You'll find your own reason to keep going. I think about that day often, that Tuesday afternoon when Lily first asked me that question, and I didn't have an answer. I think about how lost I was, how empty, how sure I was that my life was over. And I think about how wrong I was. Because now, when I wake up in the morning, I know why I'm getting out of bed. I have people who need me, people I love, a purpose that matters. And I have hope, real, genuine hope for tomorrow. Not because tomorrow is guaranteed to be perfect, but because I've learned that even when it's hard, even when it's painful, even when you've lost everything you thought mattered, you can still choose to believe. You can still choose to hope. You can still choose to keep going. And that choice, that simple, powerful choice to believe in tomorrow, changes everything. Lily taught me that, a 9-year-old homeless child with nothing but a worn stuffed rabbit and an unshakable belief that things could get better. She became my greatest teacher. She saved my life. And she didn't do it by solving all my problems or taking away my pain. She did it by showing me, through her own example, that hope isn't something you find when life is easy. Hope is something you choose when life is hard. And if a 9-year-old girl living in a shelter can choose hope every single day, then so can I, so can you, so can anyone. That's what I believe now. That's what I know. Tomorrow can be better than today. Not because life is fair, not because we're guaranteed a happy ending, but because we get to choose what we focus on. We get to choose what we believe. We get to choose hope. And that choice, that simple, powerful choice, is available to every single one of us every single day. No matter where we are, no matter what we've lost, no matter how dark it seems. We can always choose hope. We can always choose tomorrow. We can always choose to believe that better days are coming. Because sometimes they are, and sometimes the very act of believing is what makes them possible. Thank you, Lily, for teaching me that, for saving me, for showing me that even in the darkest times, there is always light. We just have to be brave enough to look for it and believe in it and choose it. Every single day, we choose hope. We choose tomorrow. We choose to believe. And that makes all the difference. If Lily's story reminded you to choose hope, show your support by subscribing, liking, and sharing this video with someone who needs it. Tell me in the comments, what's your Lily moment? When did someone unexpected teach you something powerful?